Elon Musk is leaving the Trump administration. Why now, and what's next for him and his Texas-based company on today's Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm Angela Kocherga in El Paso. We're also tracking a looming deadline for oil and gas companies who are now required to plug old wells. Plus, lawmakers move ahead with efforts to protect children online by requiring age verification for apps and possibly banning minors from TikTok and other social media altogether. Also ahead, the Trump administration continues to threaten mass deportations, but dairy farms don't seem to be losing any workers. And Mando Rayo shares his hot taco takes. That and more on today's Texas Standard. Wherever you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this 29th day of May, 2025. So glad you can join us. I'm Angela Kocherga. He's no doubt Texas's most high-profile resident, but until recently, Elon Musk was busy in Washington whittling down the federal government. Now he's back and focused on his businesses here. Musk announced Wednesday evening he was leaving his role as a special government employee and top advisor to President Trump. His job heading the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, was always supposed to be temporary. But in a recent interview with CBS, Musk was critical of the president's big, beautiful bill. He called it a, quote, massive spending bill that increases the federal deficit and, quote, undermines the work of DOGE. But just because he's leaving the Trump administration, that does not mean Musk's political influence is ending on the national stage or certainly here in Texas. Lauren McGaughy is an investigative editor and reporter with the Texas Newsroom, and she's been reporting on Musk in Texas. Lauren, welcome back to the Standard.
Thanks for having me.
Well, what do we know about why Musk is stepping back from this public role?
We didn't at first know quite what was going on here, but just in the last 24 hours, Musk has actually tweeted a couple of times on his social media platform X and given us a little more context. He actually reshared some other posts from people who noted that, that limited 130 days that he had as a special government employee is actually coming to an end this Friday. And so Musk has implied through these reposts that there's no problem between him and Trump. There's no beef there, that, this was really just the natural end of something that was always going to be temporary. Obviously, we don't know exactly what's happening in those rooms, but that's what he's sharing now on his social media site.
Well, how about his critique of the big, beautiful bill? What are the details, and does this factor in at all?
Yeah, that's really important context. Musk went on CBS News, a couple of days ago and had this critique of the president's spending tax cuts bill. And he said he was disappointed by it. Musk said that it undermined his work at the DOGE office that he propped up to cut government spending if they were just going to increase that spending in Congress. And so the timing of that, the release of that partial part of that interview is interesting. CBS is actually going to release more of it on June 1st. And so I'm interested to see what else Musk actually had to say in that broader interview.
Well, Musk is still politically powerful. Do we have a sense of whether this will reduce his influence significantly, or is that genie kind of out of the bottle?
I think it's mostly out of the bottle. How closely he works with the president remains to be seen. I think we all remember Musk was holding his own campaign rallies during the presidential election last year. Musk also had another interview this past weekend where he said that he's going to pull back on his federal campaign spending. So it appears that there is going to be some stepping back, some, maybe returning back to his businesses, which is what he's promised the shareholders of Tesla, that he'll spend less time in DC and more time on his businesses, which, as we as Texans know, are all based here in Texas, which means he might be spending a lot more time here now.
Well, based on his own stated goals, what is the view of Musk's time with the Trump administration? Did he reduce government waste as much as he wanted to?
Well, I can't get inside Musk's head, but I think I think that he would probably say he didn't reduce spending as much as he wanted to. He had this big goal, trillions of dollars he wanted to cut that got amended down and then more and more and more until it was, in the hundreds of billions. The data, according to NPR, when they really have sifted through the actual cut spending, it might be far less than that. And on his way out, Musk had expressed concerns that he wasn't able to make more cuts. And an important note here is that there's actually a federal lawsuit going on right now challenging Musk's role and the Doge office's role in cutting spending, in laying people off. And I'm curious to see whether the case remains active now that Musk is stepping away.
Now, you've been reporting about Musk's business dealings in Texas. What are you going to be looking for in the coming months when it comes to his impact on the state and even the country?
I do think that we'll likely see him here in Texas more if he's pulling back from his time in Washington, D.C. SpaceX is here. He's about to increase launches down at the South Texas launch site up to 25 times a year from just 5 times a year. They're expanding production at the Starlink facility outside of Austin. He's promised to spend more time with Tesla. The Gigafactory headquarters is also just outside of the Austin area. I'm going to be watching his potential return to Texas, more full-time return. And I'm also curious to see, and I'm working on a story about what he got from the Texas legislature this year. They're about to wrap up, and he definitely had some priorities pending in our state capital as he was spending so much time in the nation's capital. And I'm sussing out exactly what he got and what he was able to achieve there.
We'll be looking forward to that. Lauren McGaughy is an investigative editor and reporter for the Texas Newsroom. Lauren, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
A bill that aims to plug the state's abandoned oil and gas wells, sometimes called orphan wells, is headed to the governor's desk. Senate Bill 1150 by Republican State Senator Mays Middleton of Galveston puts deadlines on oil and gas companies to plug wells that are no longer operational. Carlos Nogueras Ramos has been following the bill's progress for the Texas Tribune. Carlos, thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first, tell us about the orphan wells situation in Texas. How many of these wells are there, and what are the concerns about them?
In Texas, there are upwards of 150,000 inactive wells, which are pretty much defunct. They don't produce any oil or gas. Sometimes these wells have owners or companies that oversee them. But in other scenarios, either when the company has gone bankrupt or it just doesn't exist, the well is just kind of left abandoned and no one tends to it or looks after it. There's no reporting to the Texas Railroad Commission, which regulates the oil and gas industry. And so the well's just kind of sitting there. And that's when they reach the 12-month mark, when there's no reporting on the well or maintenance, it reaches orphan status.
What are the concerns about having these orphan wells out there?
The state doesn't really know what's going on with these wells. And in recent years, they've become channels for water that travels underground from saltwater disposal injections. And the pressure that builds up in these orphan wells causes them to burst. And I mean, it's literal torrents of water that shoot upwards through the wells, again, because they have no maintenance. And more importantly, these wells haven't been sealed. And so the surface is just kind of exposed for the water to come out through it.
So what would this bill do to address the problem?
So what this bill does is set first of its kind deadlines for oil and gas operators. Any well that has been inactive for 15 years, meaning it has not produced any oil or gas, and they have no plans to reactivate it, has to be plugged or shut or sealed. And so, what that does is down the line, hopefully prevent these wells from becoming exposed to the water and bursting in the future.
So this bill had bipartisan support. Who's backing the bill?
Pretty much everyone is backing the bill. Everyone in the Texas legislature agrees that inactive wells have become an issue in Texas, particularly because of these orphan wells and the fact that they're so expensive to remediate. Once an orphan well explodes, it could cost tens of millions of dollars just to seal one well. The Texas Railroad Commission is not an agency with an endless budget. And so the advocates for many years have been saying that this issue is not something that you just throw money at. You need policy to sort of bring it under control. And so for the first time in more than a decade, lawmakers came together to introduce this bill that sets actual deadlines and cutoff dates for this bill. But there's still a little bit of concern. Some of the watchdogs in this industry seem to think that 15 years is too long for these wells to kind of remain exposed in that way. There's also extensions built into this bill, and an operator who can't afford to seal a well that just reached age 15 can enter into a compliance plan and is given at least an extra 15 years until they have to plug the well. And then another issue kind of surfacing alongside that or parallel to it is that this bill is effective in 2027, which means that by the time the next legislative session rolls around, we won't really have an understanding of how well this program is working. We won't know how many people entered into compliance plan or how many of the 150,000 wells were actually sealed, because the Texas Railroad Commission won't need to write rules and enforce them until 2027. So we're still a long ways away despite the significance of the bill.
Carlos Nogueras Ramos is Permian Basin reporter for the Texas Tribune. Carlos, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our social media editor, Wells Dunbar, joins us now with the Talk of Texas. Hi, Wells.
Howdy, Angela. Lots of reaction out there to Elon Musk's claim that he is stepping back from his role in the Trump administration. As Texas transplant Musk tweeted on X yesterday, "My scheduled time as a special government employee comes to an end." Well, Walter Riggs doesn't understand what the fuss is all about. On our Facebook page, he writes, "The way I understand it, Musk is required to depart. Special government employees, the capacity in which he's serving, are only allowed in this role for 130 days in a 365-day period." And Laura Cohen says this about Musk's departure: "He got all the data he needs. I do not believe for 1 minute he was cutting waste and fraud. His companies will be using our data to further their own interests." Well, in other news, Angela, at least one person is dead as a result of the severe storm that blew into Austin on Wednesday evening. That hail and wind blast concentrated in central East Austin, currently leaving some 30,000 Austin Energy customers without power. And cleanup is underway. I'll tell you, it sure is. I'll be back with more details on that and other stories from across the social media landscape later in the program.
Thanks, Wells. We'll look forward to that.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the Texas College Savings Plan, administered by the state of Texas. Families can save for tuition, room and board, books, and other qualified education expenses at eligible schools nationwide. Learn more at texascollegesavings.com. Support for Texas Standard comes from UNT, offering an online MBA with specializations in business analytics, HR management, and more. Classes start every 8 weeks. Details at online.unt.edu/MBA.
This is a Texas Standard. I'm Angela Kocherga. More than 30,000 Austin Energy customers did not have power as of this Thursday morning following a massive hailstorm that swept through central Texas. Strong winds, hail, and lightning damaged electrical equipment and snapped tree limbs, resulting in downed power lines. Emergency responders also performed a number of water rescues due to flash flooding Wednesday evening. Austin Energy does not have a timeline for when the power will be restored. The storms are part of a bigger pattern of severe weather across the central Texas region this week. Meanwhile, the Texas solar industry is learning details about the Trump administration's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. The bill eliminates tax breaks under the Inflation Reduction Act for investing in clean energy. The bill just passed the U.S. House of Representatives last week by one vote. The San Antonio Express News reports that Mission Solar is set to invest $265 million to expand in the San Antonio area, creating 500 new jobs. But maybe not anymore. According to the Solar Energy Industries Association, in Texas, there are 12,000 jobs related to solar energy. And you're listening to the Texas Standard. A while back, Austin resident Tracy Gardeman got an email from her insurance company saying that it would not renew the policy on her home. The reason, according to Travelers Insurance, the trees around her home created a hazard. The insurance company knew this because, without Gardeman's knowledge, a third-party company had taken aerial photos of her home. Gardeman was eventually able to get insurance coverage for her home, but she is not the first person to find out that her insurance company has been checking in on her from above. Increasingly, insurers are using satellites and planes to make coverage decisions. KUT's Audrey McGlinchy has been looking into this practice, and she joins us for the Drill Down, our monthly segment highlighting the investigative work of our partners across the state. Audrey, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, really fascinating story. Are there laws or regulations preventing insurers from using airplanes and satellites to inspect people's homes?
Not what I can find. And I think also part of your question may be what gives insurance companies the right to use aerial photos in this case. And it seems to be what I was able to find is that insurance companies, in responding to state complaints, have pointed to a right to inspect clause that's in many policies that is pretty straightforward, but basically says a company has the right to inspect your home at any time. The ones I've seen don't say how they will inspect your home, but they seem to be using that to give themselves a really broad right to inspect someone's home. And actually, in Texas, there is a law that explicitly allows insurance companies to use drones to assess homes. That law was written in 2017. I should say, though, that two insurance companies who responded to some questions I had for the story did say they do not use drones when they write policies, but it is possible and very likely they use third-party companies to do that work.
Oh, well, do we know which insurance companies are using these photos of people's homes to make policy decisions?
Yes, we do. Yeah, some of the biggest insurers in Texas use aerial photos to decide if they'll keep insuring homes. That includes State Farm, which controls about 20% of the home insurance market in the state. And also, as we mentioned earlier, with Tracy Gartman, Travelers Insurance, and then also Nationwide. By my calculations, at least 1/4 of the home insurance market in Texas is controlled by companies that use aerial photos, and it's likely much higher than that.
Well, in your reporting, you write about a company called Cape Analytics that's working with insurers. Tell us about them.
Yeah, so many of the details I found for this story came from complaints that homeowners had filed with the Texas Department of Insurance, and also documents that insurers have to file with the state. It's basically saying how they set prices, how they assess risks, how they do their jobs. And what I found in both those documents was many mentions of this company, Cape Analytics, a third-party company that insurers use, including State Farm, which I mentioned earlier. And Cape Analytics offers one big thing. It's called roof condition rating. Basically, the company offers to rate a homeowner's roof for insurance companies, and that will tell insurance companies how likely a roof is to hold up over time, how likely it is to survive storms. And the way the company does this, according to their website and a manual that I got a copy of that was filed with the state, is that they use aerial photos taken from other companies, and then they use artificial intelligence to evaluate these photos. Now, in that manual I mentioned, Cape Analytics does acknowledge that sending out a human inspector is likely more accurate. They say it will provide a more detailed and potentially more timely inspection than using aerial photos and AI to essentially evaluate the hardiness of someone's roof.
Well, so how are insurers able to verify that the photos accurately show what's going on at the homeowner's property?
That's a big question I had for insurance companies. And it was one of nearly a dozen questions I sent to 5 insurers operating in Texas. But unfortunately, they did not respond to that question. But the issue of accuracy came up in several state complaints I read, one of which actually ended in an insurance company, Nationwide in particular, admitting that they had mistakenly ended a homeowner's policy because they looked at the wrong aerial photo. Basically said, you need a new roof, and the homeowner said, no, I don't. My roof is a year old. Another issue that came up from talking to homeowners and reading through these documents was that some homeowners complained that insurance companies would not share with them the photos they were using. So some homeowners complained that beyond inaccuracy, there was just little recourse to appeal these decisions.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you next. What can a homeowner do if they want to dispute this? And again, they can't even see the photos in some cases. There's no requirement to show the data being used.
There is not a requirement, as far as I can tell. Many insurers write into their policy that they actually don't need to share inspection reports with homeowners. Now, many companies did share these photos with homeowners. They initially sent them along with the original letter saying that they were not going to renew their policy. So I was able to see many of these photos, but again, at the same time, several homeowners I spoke to and complaints I read said I wasn't even able to look at these photos to confirm that it was my house. So, folks can certainly ask for them, but at least from the policies I've read, insurance companies don't guarantee that you have a right to get a copy of these photos.
Finally, is there anything else you think homeowners should know about these aerial photos or this growing trend?
Well, I think it's important to put this into context, right? Climate change has led to more extreme disasters across the country, but especially in Texas. And that has led to more claims for damage, which has led to insurers having to pay out more. And they're also taking on more risk, right? We're all at more risk when storms are more dangerous. So this is all happening within the context of insurers are less likely to renew policies. That is true in Texas. It's also just become harder and more expensive for homeowners to stay insured, which is pretty essential when you're facing stronger storms, but also mortgage companies and banks that just won't lend you money if you don't have insurance. So this is all happening against a backdrop of it's just becoming a lot harder for homeowners across the board to insure their home.
Audrey McGlinchy is a housing reporter at KUT, and she's been talking to us for The Drill Down, the Texas Standard's monthly segment highlighting the investigative work from member stations across the state. You can find more of her story at texasstandard.org/The Drill Down. Audrey, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, committed to strengthening the state's workforce and its communities through safety and wellness grants and education initiatives. More at texasmutual.com/community impact.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Alexandra Hart. In November, voters could have had the option to change the state constitution to deny bail to undocumented immigrants accused of serious violent crimes. But the bill to put it on the ballot failed in the Texas House. The Texas Newsroom's Blaise Gainey was on the House floor Wednesday evening when lawmakers voted it down.
Critics of Senate Joint Resolution 1 say judges should not be stripped of their decision to allow or deny bail to people who could be innocent. Fort Worth Democratic Representative Ramon Romero said the bill would lead to racial discrimination.
This kind of legislation is a continued attack on the minority community and all communities of color and our communities where racial profiling is a reality.
Amarillo Republican Representative John Smithy told lawmakers before the vote that the bill is not discriminatory.
There's nothing here that discriminates against anyone. It only applies to people who have no lawful right to be in our country.
Governor Greg Abbott has said in the past that he wanted undocumented immigrants who are arrested to be denied bail and turned over to ICE. I'm Blaise Gainey in Austin.
A ban on THC products in Texas remains up in the air. Senate Bill 3 is on Governor Abbott's desk, but he has not indicated whether he will sign it. Both sides of the debate are rallying supporters to their side, including Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who held another press conference on the issue.
There are a lot of bills that pass in there. They're important bills, but nothing is more important than stopping a kid getting a hold of this junk.
The industry exploded in Texas after state lawmakers voted to legalize hemp products in 2019. Meanwhile, a bill expanding the state's compassionate use program for medical cannabis passed the Texas Senate. It includes several amendments designed to improve access to cannabis for medical reasons. That's according to Catherine Neal Harris, a drug policy fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute.
For one thing, they added chronic pain as a qualifying condition. This bill would also grant access to the program for patients with any terminal illness. The product availability, it includes inhalers and nebulizers and vaping devices.
The bill would also require the Texas Department of Public Safety to issue 12 licenses to dispensing organizations around the state, one more than the House approved. Hazy skies and reduced air quality are in the forecast this weekend in parts of Texas as Saharan dust begins drifting in from the Atlantic. The eastern part of the state will be most affected. Those with respiratory conditions and other sensitive groups are advised to take precautions like staying indoors and using air purifiers. I'm Alexandra Hart from the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Aspire Allergy and Sinus, providing same-day results and custom treatment plans to tackle allergies at the root of the problem. Over 40 locations throughout Texas. More info at aspireallergy.com.
33 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time. I'm Angela Kocherga. Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill this week that requires Apple and Google to verify the ages of people who download software from their app stores. Another bill, which has passed in the Texas House, would ban minors from having accounts on services like TikTok and Instagram. Our tech expert Omar Gallaga has written about these restrictions for CNET, and he joins us now. Omar, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, let's start with the App Store Accountability Act. It was recently signed by the governor. What will this new law do?
Well, this would require App Store operators, your Apple, your Google, to verify users' ages and or obtain parental consent for minors before they can use the store, download apps, or make any purchases. So if your kids, if they're under 18 and they're using the app stores, they will now be required to get permission from parents. And then that identity of the parents has to be verified, and an additional requirement of the law is that the app stores must confirm that the parent or guardian approving the downloads has the legal authority to do so. So that it puts a lot of onus on Google and Apple to make changes to their app store to accommodate for this and verify ages.
Yeah, so it sounds like the bill requires age verification for everyone, not just minors?
That's what it looks like. It looks like what's going to happen is that you will have to upload your driver's license or some other form of identification in order to prove that you are of age in order to use the app stores.
Well, is it safe to say that Apple and Google were not fans of this legislation?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it puts a huge burden on them to change their systems. And they also have requirements to give information to app developers on the category of age. So child, young teenager, older teenager, adult, they have to pass that information on to the app developers in order to, I guess, change the way some of the apps operate and feed information to you. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of changes. And, we've talked about Apple recently having other issues with their app store, class action lawsuits, action from the government on whether they've been complying with certain injunctions. So yeah, Apple's got a lot on its plate right now when it comes to its app store.
So the other bill, it's not a law yet, but it has generated a lot of headlines. It would effectively ban minors from social media. Tell us about that proposal and where it sits right now.
Yeah, this is House Bill 186, and it already passed the Texas House, but has not yet been voted on in the Senate, and it would require, of course, the governor's signature, but he has signaled support for it. So this would be one of the most restrictive laws in the country, and it would make it illegal for those under 18 to be on social media. That includes TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of these social media sites. And again, as with the app bill, it would require age verification through these social media services. So everyone would need to upload their information to your TikTok, Instagram, what have you, in order to prove that they're over 18.
So is this proposal unique? Have other states done anything similar?
Yeah, we've seen states like Arkansas and Ohio try to enact laws like this, and then they've been challenged immediately on First Amendment grounds that even minors have First Amendment rights and that they should be able to express themselves. One interesting argument for it in Texas that seems specific to us is that a lot of student athletes spoke out against this when it came up in the legislature, that this hurts their ability to be able to promote themselves as upcoming student athletes, teenagers. A lot of them use social media to promote themselves and get noticed, but for recruitment purposes.
Oh, very interesting. Well, you mentioned challenges in other states. What about Texas? Do experts expect challenges to this Texas bill if it's signed into law?
Yeah, absolutely. We had a law that passed in 2023 called the Scope Act that Governor Abbott signed into law, and that restricted the way tech companies could collect information from minors even that act from 2 years ago has been under legal scrutiny and has kind of been held up in the courts. And there's definitely expectations that if this law goes through, that there's going to be a lot of legal challenges, not only from the social media companies, but also from, say, some of those student athletes that were protesting it.
So one bill is already going to be a law, the other may become law, and there's age verification and identification and other data being gathered. There's already a concern about data and protecting data. Anything to watch out for in this respect? It's both minors and their parents now.
Yeah, I think one unanticipated consequence of all these bills is that we're going to have to be giving more information to app stores, to social media sites, where anyone that wants to use them that is of age is going to have to submit information. So that's more data they're collecting on. There's more privacy issues around that. There's even a bill going through that may pass into law that would require social media platforms to display a warning label about mental health risks for minors. So that, that's another bill. So definitely the state of Texas has taken it on as, we are going to do something about, kids on the internet, kids in social media, and the mental health effects that these sites have.
We'll certainly be watching. Omar Gallaga covers technology for CNET, and we'll have a link to his latest at texasstandard.org. Omar, thank you so much.
I sure appreciate it. Thanks.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the online UT High School, offering a full-time diploma program for remote, asynchronous learners throughout Texas. More at highschool.utexas.edu/tuition free.
My name is Michael Owens. I live in Cypress, Texas, and I'm a retired school teacher. And this story is about Grapeland, Texas, where I lived as a child and my father is from. The inspiration of this story is about a real life story that I had probably in the late 50s, early 60s. The poem was written and submitted to the Poetry Society of Texas, and in 2011, it won the Jake Fegan Memorial Poetry Award. And I'd like to read to you Box Purse. Summer brought me to live with country cousins, without television, telephone, or electricity. Aunt Reba locked us outside in the heat with our imaginations. We sought devilment. Squawking and feathers flying from the chicken coop, we three boy cousins ran to investigate. In the coop we found ourselves a chicken snake, stuffed with eggs, coiled up, digesting dinner. Boyce Ray grabbed it and held it by the head. Now where do we put it, was the question. He spied my sister's small black box purse on the back porch by my pile of things. 6 hands stuffed the snake into the purse, quickly closed it up and schemed. What do we do with the angry thing? Out front on the asphalt road from town, we placed the purse on the center line, hid it in the tall grass, out of sight, and watched. Our hearts pumped with anticipation when an old black car came cruising down the road. We could see 6 high school boys packed inside. It slowed down and passed, stopped and backed up. The back door opened. Out came a hand and snatched the purse. The door slammed shut. The car took off. Before we could count to 3, all 4 doors flew open. The 6 bodies flew out, yelling and shouting as they radiated out. Within a second, they paused to see the car, 4 doors wide open, rolling down the hill. 6 young men now running close behind. A rolling crash was silent about a quarter mile away.
That was Michael Owens with his award-winning poem, Box Purse.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. chances are you won't find one thing in Texas more widely loved and furiously fought over than the taco. With the power to both bring folks together and spark long-lasting regional rivalries, the tacos crossed into the Lone Star State's cultural zeitgeist, and with that, of course, comes the flooding of hot takes, raising some eyebrows. And the host of the Tacos of Texas podcast has lots of hot takes on his plate today. Mondo Rayo. Mondo, ¿qué ande, güey?
Dang, that's a hot take right there.
All right,
David.
see, now,
How are you?
You've been rubbing off on me, man. I've been trying out some of these tips that you've been, so I had to put that in there. Actually, Kristen,
Love it.
Kristen Cabrera, our producer, said, "Hey, you got to say that. That'll get a chuckle out of him." I hear you've been gathering some taco hot takes. What's the deal? Why you been doing that?
Yeah, like it's just kind of one of those things where you're like, it's maybe an unpopular opinion, and I have some unpopular opinions myself, but let's embrace those. It's okay to be yourself and stand out amongst the crowd. So for season 5, we're planning our 5th season, El Cinco, and we're actually inviting folks to give us their hot takes, their hot taco takes. And so we're inviting folks to come to the taco podcast studio and come give us your hot takes. But I got some to warm y'all up for.
Oh, well, all right. Rubbing my hands together here. Give me one. Give me your first hot take.
All right. Definitely, obviously, living in Austin and proximity to like San Antonio and lots of breakfast tacos. Potatoes are a filler on breakfast tacos. That is like, why are you doing that? For me,
I totally
want
get that.
Right? I want some good eggs, some good protein, but those potatoes, that's just like, they're just not needed. And the second part, there's a two-parter. Mm-hmm. If you put mashed potatoes in a taco, I mean, that's just, I don't know, man. That's just lazy.
Now, is this a hot take from your heart, or is this one of your podcast listeners?
No, some of these are my own. Some of these, like, I've heard out in the taco verse.
Yeah,
sure.
right. But you will not get mashed potatoes, no way, and chunks of potatoes. That's just
you need those chunks. You need the char on the potato. Come on, man.
Okay, but you're not against potatoes in tacos, are you?
Let me just say that they're not my favorite.
All right. Fair enough. Give me some more eggs. All right.
Okay, so when you walk into a restaurant, and maybe I'm old school about this, but I judge a restaurant when you have to pay for chips and salsa. Man, that stuff should be for free.
There
it's
you
part
go.
Of the atmosphere.
There you
know
go.
What I mean?
I do know what you mean, man.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That just ain't right.
The thing about it is it was my understanding that the original idea behind chips and salsa was to get people sort of ordering more cervezas while they're waiting for,
that's true.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, totally. And then, the problem is people get full on the chips and salsa.
Well, let's hear another. You got a third for us?
Okay, cool. So definitely, I think when you go to Tex-Mex restaurants, I mean, you don't have to put queso on everything. Like queso on this, queso over tortilla. The first time I actually ate at a Tex-Mex place in Austin, and obviously coming from El Paso, I was like, what is this, Tex-Mex, watered down Mexican food?
Yeah, I get it.
Just put like a corn tortilla with queso on top of it. I'm like, and that's a dish? No. So that's my hot take.
Now let me ask you, sort of related to that, what about ranchera sauce on everything?
Ranchera sauce is good for huevo rancheros. You know what I mean?
Yeah, keep it to that.
It has its place. And here's one for the home cooks. If you put like a good piece of pork butt, roast, in an Instant Pot, do not call it carnitas. I mean, carnitas is a very specific dish. It's cooked in its own fat for a long periods of time, not within this like 20-minute window of an Instant Pot.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like
I totally get it. Totally get that. And I've wondered about this very thing because I often think of carnitas. I think it's used as a kind of a synonym for pork sometimes, but it's but that's not okay.
No.
Now, listen, you mentioned you were hoping to get folks send in their taco hot takes. Where do they do that?
That's right. Look us up on Instagram at United Tacos of America. And we have our link in our bio. I have a post about it. If you're in the Austin area or you want to come by the Austin studio and give us your best taco take, and you'll be on season 5, and we'll have a good conversation about it.
Yeah, and of course, folks, it would be a pro move if you would just bring a bag of tacos so y'all could all enjoy it together, right?
All of it together.
Armando Raya is the host of the Tacos of Texas podcast, and of course, we're going to have more on how you can send in your taco hot takes, texasstandard.org. Mondo, thanks so much for tacoing with us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, David. Catch you next time.
Support for Tacos of Texas comes from H-E-B, whose mi tienda salsas, marinated meats, tortillas, quesos, and more are inspired by the authentic flavors of Mexico. H-E-B. Here, everything's better.
This is a Texas Standard. I'm Angela Kocherga. President Donald Trump has promised mass deportations. That's been a big concern for industries that rely on workers without legal immigration status, including dairy farms. Texas is the number 3 dairy-producing state in the country, and according to the Texas Association of Dairymen, that includes 260,000 jobs. A few months into the new administration, the rhetoric is still intense, and there have been many high-profile deportations. But as Bridget Bowden reports from Wisconsin, dairy workers there are carrying on with their jobs.
Once a week on a dairy farm in western Wisconsin, there's a class to help workers from Mexico learn English.
¿Cómo se dice estoy orgulloso de mí mismo?
I am proud of myself.
Kevin came to Wisconsin from Mexico about 5 years ago and has been saving money to build a house back home. He says he never feared being deported before the 2024 election. But now...
Sí, un poco. De no tener miedo, tal vez no, pero preocupante sí, porque...
He says he's a little worried, mostly about being treated badly by immigration authorities. But he's not scared, he says. He hasn't changed his day-to-day behavior at all. For the dairy industry, that's good. The National Milk Producers Federation estimates that nearly 80% of U.S. milk is produced by farms that employ immigrants. In Wisconsin, one of the top milk-producing states in the country, people without legal status perform an estimated 70% of the labor on dairy farms. Farm owner John Rosenau says the majority of people he employs are from Mexico. He's hopeful the more than $50 billion the dairy industry contributes to Wisconsin's economy each year will protect dairy workers from being deported.
It just doesn't make sense that the federal government would ruin an industry by being overzealous on immigration. And we think it's rhetoric.
But other producers are more worried about how the industry's workforce will react to the growing number of deportations. Doug Chapin is a dairy farmer in central Michigan and board chair of the state's Milk Producers Association. He recently had an employee leave the farm and return to his home country.
His family was there, and so he chose to go back. And I think some of it dealt with the current immigration pressures, I'll say.
Chapin says there is some optimism that the Trump administration's focus on immigration could lead to reforms. He says the dairy industry has been asking lawmakers for 2 decades to update immigration policies. The current system primarily uses seasonal visas, which don't work for milking cows year-round.
The farm community does have a history of being a supporter of President Trump, and so I'm hoping that relationship can maybe help with the process.
Some of the highest profile immigration actions under the Trump administration have been more politically motivated rather than workplace raids, like student visa holders who've been arrested and detained after participating in protests. Julia Gillette is the associate director of the U.S. program at the Migration Policy Institute. She says there are a lot of outstanding legal questions surrounding the tactics the Trump administration is using.
How those court cases proceed could determine the course of some of those activities.
And it could shape whether the administration pursues more sweeping deportations. Gillette says there have been slightly more total deportations so far than during the first Trump administration, but fewer than the first years under President Obama. She says most arrests happen when local jails turn people over to ICE. Still, she suspects that the Trump administration is planning some type of workplace enforcement effort at some point.
Those take some time to prepare, and often there's a lot of investigation that happens before the actual arrest happens. So those may be in the works.
Gillette says other industries like meatpacking have been more frequent targets of these raids, but ICE agents have arrested workers on a dairy farm in New York and one in Vermont in the last 2 months. While all that plays out, the cows on Rosenau's farm in Wisconsin still have to be milked and cared for, day in and day out. Ramon has been working on the farm for about 2 years. Like many dairy workers in the area, his wife and kids are back in Mexico.
Por mí no hay problema, me puede agarrar, me deporta. Pero lo que sería es el rancho.
He says for him, it wouldn't be a problem. They can deport him, but what about the farm?
No más dinero, no más leche.
No more money, no more milk. I'm Bridget Bowden, Harvest Public Media.
Texas Standard is part of Harvest Public Media, a collaboration of public media newsrooms in the Midwest and Great Plains. And you're listening to the Texas Standard. Wells Dunbar is back with more of your social media comments. Hi, Wells.
Hi, Angela. Good to be back with you. As I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, at least one person dead as a result of this severe wind and hailstorm that hit Austin Wednesday. That blast leaving apparently some 37,000 Austin Energy customers without power as of this reading. That one confirmed fatality, person found dead at the scene of a water rescue, 2 other people hospitalized, and Austin Energy saying it could take a few days to restore power to everyone in the city. Just a sign of the sudden and vociferous impact of this storm. Lots of people talking about it on the Austin subreddit, especially one really concerning or strange aspect of it, Angela, just how localized it was in central East Austin. As one Redditor writes, I just live 8 miles south and I only had wind and sun. And another Redditor says it's reading this like it happened in another city, but obviously for the people that were there in the brunt of it, very frightening experience. One comment here from another Redditor describes being at a restaurant, Kirby Lane in Mueller, that's a central East Austin neighborhood in Austin, with my kids. I judged the severity of the storm by looking at the restaurant across the street. We could not see past the windows for about 10 minutes, and when they came outside, there was about 8 inches of ice cube sized hail in the street. And I gotta say, Angela, I was there for it. My kids and I were pretty darn freaked out when this occurred. I used to live in Dallas. I've been through some severe weather events. Obviously, the winter freeze, terrifying in its own way back in 2020 due to its prolonged nature, but just due to its sudden and severe nature, this was really a one-of-a-kind, frightening experience. So Austin continuing to dig itself out from all that in the aftermath of really a sudden storm.
Very scary and sudden, as you said, extreme weather. And you mentioned for a lot of kids, it was the last day of school, so they had to worry about that. Heck of a way to start the summer. What are you going to do? Well, sticking with the capital city a moment longer, and of course, the legislature about to wrap things up, about to adjourn, sine die, if you will, next week on the 2nd. I believe that is a Monday. So, of course, we're just trying to keep an eye on where things stand here. Lots of legislation that may or may not get over the finish line. I talked about this one a little bit yesterday, I believe. Program to establish Texas, or rather to refill the coffers of the Texas Film Incentive Program. I believe it was working its way through the legislature with a $500 million incentive budget. That number slashed to $300 million, but apparently still on the table. And looks like a headline from the Tribune here, bill that would have banned Texas minors from social media misses key deadline. So another example of bills falling by the wayside there, Angela. Oh, well, we're out of time for today. Thank you, Wells. Keep up with the Standard 24/7 at texasstandard.org. From all of us at the Standard, thanks for listening. I'm Angela Kocherga, wishing you the best from El Paso.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the Texas ABLE program, helping eligible Texans with disabilities save and plan for the future to pay for qualified disability expenses with a tax-advantaged ABLE account. Learn more at texasable.org. Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Woldridge, Adrian Killam, the George Huntington Family, and the Cynthia and George Mitchell Foundation.